Every once in a while, there's a big ship everybody's looking forward to that finally releases, and the Perseus from RSI is just such a ship. With 2 sets of massive size 8 bespoke ballistic weapons, made into one of the best designed interiors that they've released for a big ship yet, it's no wonder that it's fast becoming one of the community's favorite ships that they've ever released. Especially because when you take it out with a full crew to do exactly what it was made for, it's probably one of the most fun ships to fly with a crew that they've added into the game. So in today's Architect Reviews, we're going to be taking a look at this ship from stem to stern. Everything from its exterior to its interior to see whether or not it lives up to the hype. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to decide whether or not you want to make it your new ride into the new Nyx system. And if along the way you like it and you think I deserve it, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to show your support. Any good ship design begins with its silhouette, the first gesture in the architectural procession, long before you start to see any details. For the Perseus, that opening statement is a sharp, deliberate wedge. It's a form that signals purpose without theatrics, carrying the naval confidence of a spear point meant to push forward on the front line rather than just sitting behind it. Again, it evokes a sense of power like that of the 890 jump that I reviewed so long ago. The strength of the silhouette lies not only in its aggression, but also in its restraint. The exterior avoids unnecessary ornamentation, sticking to a disciplined angular massing. Aside from a few clear RSI flourishes, extending antenna arrays, and beautifully articulated quad outboard thrusters, the hull remains tightly composed, and the bridge itself sits in a distinctly naval posture, above the bow framed through RSI's now classical strut-reinforced canopy. Below it, the hull remains compact, armored, echoing the designs we've seen from ships like the Polaris in texture, while establishing its own design language through a clean separation of a wedge-like hull and elevated bridge, something that maybe calls to larger sister ships like the Bengal, something we don't have in game yet but we've seen before. Toward midship, mirrored docking collars on both port and starboard integrate seamlessly into a flare of the hull. And then if we move farther aft looking at the ship, the hull steps upward, again, revealing intakes, antenna arrays, and stabilizing fins, engineered for atmospheric maneuverability. The overall composition is utilitarian, but functional forms are arranged in a clear hierarchy, softened by RSI's characteristic precision that separates it from other similar utilitarian languages like that of Drake, which prefers, I think, sometimes function more than a pretty form, but I think that's something that's quite endearing to that language. As those forms progress toward the rear, they resolve in 4 outboard engine clusters, similar to many other ships from the RSI design pool. Each one is detailed with sculpted nozzles and mechanical articulation that would feel right at home on a hero ship in a high-budget sci-fi film. It's a surprising flourish after such a disciplined exterior, and yet I think it still fits. It's something I've come to expect from big ships that come out of RSI at this point. This purposeful martial aesthetic continues into the ship's armament. The Perseus mounts 2 heavy turret batteries, one sitting just forward of the bridge and one aft below and just near the rear engine clusters. Each hold a pair of bespoke ballistic size 8 cannons supported by 2 slaved size 3 mounts that can be swapped out from its stock Gatling ballistics to anything the owner might like a set of energy weapons for example, giving gunners the option to go after smaller targets if they get past fighter screens, although it's not recommended to focus on the size 3s over the size 8s. Supporting these main turrets are 2 additional size 3 remote turrets that can be operated from the bridge, one beneath the bow and one sitting directly above the bridge, allowing you to cover the ship from nearly any angle. And as if that weren't enough, rounding out the arsenal are 2 batteries of size 5 torpedoes that can stack up to 20 in each, with room for some spares and an internal reloadable magazine, all of which are fireable in salvos of 4 from a remote operating station that can send torpedoes completely 180 degrees aft, so if anybody's following too close, well, they're gonna find out quick that even there they can be hit by torps. And for a vessel built around decisive engagement, RSI also gives the Perseus unusually thoughtful ingress and egress options. A 3-door layered airlock just aft of the bridge provides quick access for the command crew, while the 2 port and starboard side docking collars offer access from stations when parking in space. When landed, a drop-down cargo lift handles 96 SCU of storage, paired with a dedicated personnel lift that leads directly into the cargo deck. Notably, this lift is separate from the ship's main circulation shaft, a deliberate split between logistics flow and crew management that hints at a more refined interior logic that I think should set a precedent for ships moving forward. And on that note, I think it's time we took a step inside. Whether entering from a space station or from the ground via the personnel lift or cargo lift, you'll be entering through the cargo bay of the Perseus. Its double-height space makes a rather grand impact, evoking a sense of a grand hall, even if it's really meant as utilitarian space, being double height to allow for additional cargo storage and easier storage of vehicles. On either side of the side docking collars, you also find vertical windows. I assume these are designed to allow for visual confirmation of alignment for the docking collar, but it's just awesome to see windows in a ship. If I'm flying around space or a planet, I want to see what's going on outside. And according to lore, these things are as strong as steel, so there's really little excuse. You'll also find in the Perseus that they've vastly improved the labeling system and its legibility. This makes navigating the ship in a pinch, if you're unfamiliar with it or new to it, very simple, especially when some of the corridors can come off quite similar due to a similar design language employed throughout the ship. The designers have also thought carefully about what happens when the power goes out. You'll find a variety of ladders to get you up and down the different decks of the ship in the case of emergency, allowing you to make those necessary repairs to make the ship operational again. Sealed behind heavy blast doors off the main cargo deck, you'll also find 2 of the magazines for the size 5 torpedo bays. The rearmost section towards the cargo deck is the storage rack, while the forward section is the actual magazine that feeds the torpedoes into the forward-facing torpedo tubes. And I think this really demonstrates how far CIG has come in thinking critically about how program is used in a ship to make it easier for players to actually engage in gameplay with it. You load the torpedoes into the cargo bay, then onto the rack, and then when you're in a battle, you reload the magazine straight off the rack. And as you'll find when we continue the tour, this isn't the only space that's been very well thought out. There's a basketball court that you can deploy in the cargo bay, and while at first it may seem like this is an unnecessary whimsical addition, when you think about it, crew need a place to spend leisure time, to blow off steam, to improve morale. It's a great example of how thinking about how a space is used can inform some interesting and fun detail ideas. Ideas that also give a space more narrative depth. And that logic is followed up by the location of the main circulation artery, which you'll find behind these lower deck doors just opposite of the main lift as you enter. Here you'll find the main artery of circulation, a ladder in case power goes off, and an elevator that will take you all the way up to the command deck. This is rather different than some other ships we've seen in the game where the circulation elevator goes all the way to the outside. Here, by separating it, you offer some additional security from people getting on board. They have to pass through multiple layers in order to get to this main circulation, but it's not convoluted. It's a main artery that leads you all the way to the command deck, allowing you to easily traverse the different levels of the ship. This first main hallway also reveals that the Zeus borrows a lot from ships like the Zeus and the Polaris to some extent, though I would say that they've improved quite a bit on the interior language of RSI ships from the Polaris, improving on detailing resolution like that found here on the ceiling of this deck, where metal grating with red lighting gives a sense of mechanical depth to the ship, giving it some visual weight. Here you'll also see some more previews of the upcoming engineering gameplay through accessible panels that will reveal mechanical components that you'll need to repair and swap out in a pinch when in combat or when needing to repair your ship after a long voyage. Further aft, you'll find access to the ship's lower main battery, the 2 size 8s we talked about earlier. And here are some pretty cool thoughtful details, like tracks for the ammunition to go down into the turret itself, and places for where I assume there will eventually be places to replace the ammo boxes as they are depleted. Hopping into the turret also shows a cool 2-stage animation that brings you up into the canopy of one of these turrets. This lower battery actually lowers down to give you a better view of your surroundings and allow you to do broadsides a bit more easily. But now let's head up to the mid-deck, which will give us access to the crew quarters, leisure area, engineering section, and other turret access. Unlike the lower deck hall, you'll find that although this deck has a similar form language to the lower deck, its color scheme is a bit warmer and lighter, subtly suggesting its more domestic use case as a place for the crew to relax. If you look closely, you'll also find some very cool little details, like this little panel on the wall that seems to kind of remind me of something from the Enterprise, and these stitched panels that make the hallway feel just a little bit softer than the harsh mechanical ones below. And lighting too was well thought out here. Before we visit the crew quarters though, we're going to visit more forward of the ship again to check out that upper mezzanine area, the catwalk above the cargo bay, and then following that, the upper area of the torpedo bay and the forward turret. Here you'll find button panels to deploy the lower cargo lift, but you'll also find that there's a button to deploy that basketball hoop I told you guys earlier about. Heading into the torpedo bay, the design of the hallway once again changes from that more domestic feeling one forward in the ship to a clearly more martial style that's meant to signify the ship's more military purpose. On either side of the airlock, you'll find access to 2 escape pods meant for the engineer and torpedo operator. Quick access means that they'll be able to survive in a pinch. Again, thinking about the future of how the ship is going to be used. Again, here you'll also find that the entire space has been very well thought out in terms of detailing, employing layering that reveals mechanicals beneath, but covering them up in a way that still feels neat and organized, unlike the loose cabling of details found on ships from Drake. And I also love that there's this double height connection directly into the torpedo magazines from here, so that you can look down at them and see what's going on, and visually confirm whether or not you have torpedoes left, and also just see them loaded into the tubes. It's a very cool animation. And just forward of that, you'll find access to the ship's second main battery, the one that's featured on the forward bow of the ship. Returning aft though, we're gonna go back to that area we skipped over, the crew quarters and leisure areas for the 7 crew members that you'll have on board. Here, stepping up a set of stairs, you'll find on the right side of the hallway a window that looks into the mess hall and leisure area for the ship. Again, you'll notice that the lighting scheme here is warmer, and the colors are a bit warmer gray, signifying again this is a domestic space, separate from the mechanical and utilitarian spaces found throughout the other parts of the ship. The mess hall itself is very well appointed. Storage areas are found here for additional food and display, as well as a variety of different types of areas to relax and play some pool and maybe even kick back and have a beer after a long patrol. The dining table also features a set of screens, which makes me think that the space could double as a briefing room. Double purposing a room is something that I think that CIG could consider for future ship designs. However, there does appear to be an over-detailing of the floor, with an excessive amount of paneling and textures that kind of break up the otherwise shape. I don't think it's a bad thing sometimes to just let the floor be a single material or a set of materials. Sometimes it can get overly complex. And this nook area also lacks a proper place to set down things like drinks or food during a conversation, but that's more of a small nitpick. The space also features some pretty novel new additions to the game, like places to display pictures on the wall via these white squares you'll find adorned in 3 different parts, 2 above the pool table and 1 next to that little conversation nook. Although I'd caution most of you from decorating the interiors of your ships, as when they blow up they tend to lose everything, so just be aware of that. And I'd hate to say that those explosions are often not because of combat, more because of bugs. Now, in between the crew quarters and the crew leisure area, you'll find one of the main engineering areas of the ship that gives you access to a variety of components. Its close proximity to the crew quarters though does mean it's pretty easily accessible for those who need to maintain it, so that's a pretty thoughtful association with program. Just across the hall from the mess hall is the crew quarters section. Here you'll find 6 bunks for the primary crew. 4 gunners, 1 engineer, and 1 torpedo operator. It does seem like they're thinking ahead to future gameplay, unlike other ships which do seem to lack crew positions for all of the required things a crew will need to do. Here you'll see a really nice expression of structure, something found throughout the ship, but I just like to point it out here because I think it helps inform a space in terms of design, but also gives it visual weight and realism. The bunks themselves are very well appointed, and I think these should set the standard for the bunks you'll find throughout each ship in the game, including their own individual lights that can be operated by the occupant, something that's not present on all ships in the game, including new ones that have recently come out. I think this just comes down to a lack of consistency between different ship teams and artists. Although I will note that the location of the reading light is wrong in some of these bunks and probably should be flipped around so that you can more easily use said light. The crew also has access to their own ship's head, which is accessed directly off of the crew quarters. It has its own folding toilet and shower combo space. It's quite small, but it's not a big ship, and it's not a big crew, so it seems appropriate for the size of it. As great as the space is, though, there is one little oddity. There's an armory in the back of the space that is unlabeled anywhere. You won't find a label of it in the main quarter or in the crew quarters itself. It definitely seems like they're not trying to hide it, so it feels like an omission or a mistake maybe by one of the artists or designers, something that I hope that they come back and correct. But it gives you a place to store up to 12 weapons, 12 utilities, 12 secondaries, and 6 crew suits for combat or EVA. But now I think it's high time we take a look at the command deck of the Perseus, as it offers one of the cooler spaces you'll find on board. Exiting the elevator reveals, again, another window aboard the Perseus, a rather thick one, but one nonetheless, extending the space visually to the outside and connecting you with the surrounding environment. A nice touch that, again, I want to see more of on ships in Star Citizen. Here you'll also find 4 escape pods for the command crew that will be on this deck during operation, and most aft of this deck is access to the captain's private quarters. For the size of the ship, it's really well appointed and nicely sized, with room for storage for knickknacks to show off your various trophies and items you may have collected around the universe, something that I think every captain's quarters really needs to have. And just below the bench for visitors is a window looking out yet again to the outside. There's also excellent detailing here, once again borrowing from ships like the Zeus, with structure sweeping underneath floor plating to give it a sense of depth. Although there are some unresolved details here, like one just adjacent to the suit locker that just ends in the gray floor plating. The captain's seat also has a pretty cool little parlor trick. Aside from its ability to swivel, something that they first started off on the Polaris, it also has its own little camera that looks out to the hallway just outside the captain's quarters to see who's waiting outside, and gives you a button panel to let them in, reminding me again of ships like the Enterprise. Now they just have to add a little chime outside the door to let you know that somebody's waiting, so you can really enact your Enterprise D fantasies as Captain Picard. Just beside the seat is also another very thick window, and beyond that are the captain's personal quarters, a place to store weapons, accessories, secondaries, a place to go to sleep, and of course a button panel to toggle the lights on and off from the flick of a switch. And as you might expect, the captain has access to their own personal head. One small critique of the space, though, is that when you enter this space, you get full view of the captain's personal effects, something that I think maybe feels a little inappropriate. I would have preferred there to be a bulkhead with a small door separating that sleeping area from this forward ready room so that the captain could easily have conversations with crewmates without revealing too much about their own personal lives. My other major critique is that the shape of this space, the form of it on the interior, is very different from the exterior form of the ship. It seems, in this case, to be rather forced for the sake of being consistent, but I would say to the designers that it's not necessary for you to always follow that same shape language on every deck. Sometimes it's great to let the shape of the ship itself inform how the interior structure is to be laid out. And this unfortunately has what's produced those really deep windows that just feel a little bit unnecessary. I think there was a way to have done this without having to make the poche, the space that's unoccupied by anything, so thick. As we talked about in the first part of the video, there's also an ingress and egress point on this deck, allowing for quick exits and entries from EVA or even an atmosphere of the command crew. There's also a nice little deck area out here with a railing so that you can take a look outside the ship when in atmosphere and in gravity. Just be careful if you're in gravity not to step too far beyond this railing, or you might slip off and fall to your certain death. While potentially a bit of a weak point for the command deck, it does feature 3 doors that must be shot individually in order to open it up when it's locked. We tested this, and it does work. Now though, it's time for the space that many of you have been probably waiting to see, the bridge itself. The bridge is a rather grand space that steps up into the large and expansive canopy that looks out over the bow of the ship and to the exterior, allowing for the 3 operators to get a good view of what's going on during a battle. The center seat is the primary pilot or captain's seat, while the left seat manages the lower forward turret, and the right seat manages the top rear turret. That right seat, though, can operate as a co-pilot seat if the pilot seat is not occupied, allowing them to fly the ship when the captain steps back into their crew quarters. And the most fanciful animation, of course, takes place with this captain's seat, going up on a track and swinging around to give you a grand view of your surroundings. And it's one that you'll really need to use if you plan to actually use this ship in combat. The only main thing that I would say is not so great about this bridge is its lack of a jump seat and console for an engineer, something that I really want to see all big ships in the game have, as it is a bit of a hassle for an engineer to have to go all the way down to the engineering deck to monitor what's going on in the ship. And it also gives an option for any deck crew to be able to monitor any fires that are happening on board, something again that you can't do until you go down to an engineering console below decks. But whether you're cruising high in the atmosphere of a gas giant or you're out in space looking to deal some damage to some unsuspecting foes, the bridge remains to be a fantastic place to be. In terms of handling, the ship is faster than you might expect in a straight line, capable of pushing out to 1,050 meters a second in nav mode. And while it's not maneuverable as you might expect for a ship of its size, it can still maneuver around bigger ships that it's meant to target. And all of it comes alive when you take it out for a fight. The ship features some very cool improvements to space combat for big ships. One such improvement is being able to see where the remote turret is facing in the operator's seat. Right now you can see a dot in the middle of my screen. That's where my remote turret is looking. I can actually fire that remote turret now from this seat whilst in the bridge view, making for a very epic experience, but also a practical one if I need to monitor things like shields while the pilot is focused on maneuvering. And that good maneuvering is a big part of what makes the Perseus so much fun. It requires proper coordination between your two main gunners and the pilot to make sure that all 4 guns are able to get on target at any given time, which is not as easy as it might sound. And while the pilot can operate its top remote turret as well as torpedoes independently of individual operators, it's more advantageous to have somebody on those secondary seats, allowing you to fire torpedoes at 180 degrees from the direction of travel of your ship, while the remote turret operators are fending off any fighters that get past screens or too close to an otherwise pretty vulnerable ship to dealing with light fighters. And that really is the weakest part of the Perseus. It's not meant to engage light or even medium fighters that well. If you go up against any of those ships, you're likely going to have quite a challenge on your hands. The shields are not going to last forever, and good pilots will be able to kite you until you die, which is why it's crucial for the pilot to be focused on the positioning of the ship as well as shield faces to make sure that it's most protected and most advantaged going up against the big targets it's meant to face. And here I'm going to share a little secret with you guys that I learned while piloting this thing. The best way to make sure that both batteries are able to get a salvo on your target is to keep that target ship aligned with one of those struts. That means that both the top and bottom turret have a comfortable range to hit whatever you're trying to kill. Just be careful if it happens to be a Nidgers, because it can one-shot you with a railgun. Overall then, the Perseus is a fun ship to fly for its purpose, but it's also a ship that's been very well conceived of and executed from the ground up. I have so very few notes or criticisms to share with you about the ship because I really do think it's one of the better ships that they've ever put out. I think that this should set a strong precedent for ships going forward. It should be an exemplar to live up to for other large ship interiors, and one that I hope that the Polaris learns from in what I hope will also be a little bit of a refinement going forward, as its interior still feels a bit lackluster compared to ships like the Perseus. Despite this ship being pretty much the size of a hammerhead, it almost feels like a subcapital ship, despite the fact that it's not even classified as one. It is a heavy gunship, and I think that just speaks to the success of this design, which is why I've reserved a spot for it in my own hangar. But how about you? Is this one of those ships you want to save up for to get in-game or even buy on the website? Let me know down in the comment section below. And of course, if you like this video, you know what to do. If you also want to get into Star Citizen today, I've got a referral code here on my screen that you can use after you enjoy the free fly that is currently ongoing as of the creation of this video. I've been Morphologist, hope to see you in the next one.